Well, we talked about Regice last video, so I figured we might as well talk about Regidrago this time. Because when Pokemon Home support does arrive, you will be able to add Regidrago to Scarlet and Violet, meaning it will eventually show up in competitive play once it becomes legal. So we're going to talk about it starting with the typing, and Regidrago is a dragon. Mono Dragon does not really have amazing offense. It's a relatively consistent stab move though, and is slightly better than normal type as far as a stab goes, because you do have a super effective as well as only one resist, and then there is still an immunity, which not being able to hit fairy is, I think, slightly worse than that of not being able to hit ghost. So in that way, it's not as good as normal, but by the stats, it's better than normal. And defensively, it's not bad. You do have 4 resist being the very standard fire, water, grass core as well as electric, which is what makes dragons so good in VGC, because fire, water, grass is a very common combination, and a lot of really good teams will typically have a fire, water, grass core in it. Just think Pal Balance, for example. But with fairy and ice being quite common offensive typings in Scarlet and Violet's meta, you will definitely want something to cover that. Now, the obvious choice for Terra type, if you want a defensive Terra type for Mono Dragon, is that of Steel. It resists all of that. But you probably could get away with any of the starter typings as well, because those are just great defensive typings to have in general. Drago, similar to Aleki, has an ability that buffs its stab type damage by 50%, which it works the same way that Aleki's does, in that it functions as a buff to your raw attack stat when you use a stab move, in this case dragon type moves, giving this some very strong dragon type offense. And take a look at these stats. So compared to Aleki, the speed stat and HP stat are flipped, and everything else is the same. So instead of having a ridiculous amount of speed, you have an unreasonably high hit point stat, combined with the same mediocre defense and special defense stats. So even though this looks like it should be very bulky, you really have to put investment in the defense stats if you want that bulk to work out, because of how the calculations work in this game. And it has the same offense as Regieleki at 100 physical and special attack. Now, the moveset is a little bit different. This Pokemon no longer has access to Scale Shot or Breaking Swipe, and those moves were replaced with Earth Power and Earthquake, so it has ground type coverage for some reason. Outside of that change, it's essentially the same. You do have its very strong signature move, Dragon Energy, which acts like Eruption and Water Spell, but it's Dragon type, which is a great move, except that Fairy is immune to this move. Kind of gets in the way of the utility of this. And it has all the other dragon moves you could think of, like Dragon Dance, Dragon Claw, Dragon Pulse, Outrage, and Draco Meteor. And it does actually get a few supportive moves like the screens, and a couple of interesting coverage moves like Crunch, as well as Hammer Arm, and even several normal type moves like Thrash and Explosion. And I guess its real coverage comes from the Fang moves that it gets access to. And it also has some further strange options such as Endure and Reversal. So here's the problem with Regidrago. This has been its problem since Gen 8, and I doubt it's going to change in Gen 9. This Pokemon is not easy to set up. It has a speed stat that is too fast for Trick Room, and too slow to get quick sweeps with its spread attack, which makes it very hard to fully utilize its most powerful option, which is Dragon Energy. So even its best role as being an anti-dragon nuke, it just doesn't have the right stat distribution to make use of that. That speed stat is really not good for this Pokemon at all, which just makes it very hard to play, hard to set up. You could run it Choice Scarf, it will still be slower than some of the faster Paradox forms. If you run it bulky, it no longer has that super threatening offense, and even then it still probably gets wiped out by a Moonblast from Flutter Mane. Being able to change its Terra type will give it some help, but I don't think it's enough to really fix its issue. As long as it still takes a reasonable hit before it's able to get off dragon energy, the whole gimmick of it is just null and void, basically. So while Regidrago could be hard to deal with if your team's not ready for it, for your team to not be ready for it, you would need terrible speed control and no fairy type, which essentially means you just have a bad team. And you really don't even need a fairy type to get rid of this thing. There's dragons that are faster than this. Baxcalibur would be very difficult for Regidrago to deal with. And there's also several strong ice types in this meta. Just all things that give Regidrago a hard time. So I think it's going to be exactly like it was in Gen 8. A fun gimmick, but you're only going to be able to get it off on teams that are just very poorly optimized. And yeah, I don't think there's really much more to say. It doesn't have the right combination of things to really be good, and I don't really see any way of fixing that outside of just giving it more utility in the form of a better move pool. So Regidrago, probably like a C or D tier. Fun gimmick. Aleki's way better. But anyway, that's gonna be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.